Welcome, everyone. I believe it's episode 18, if I'm not mistaken. And I've got a very different guest on today. So, usually it's been esports people, host roles, interview roles, commentator roles, analyst, and play by play. I've had all of that. But I did mention in my Patreon video that I'd be interested in talking to people from more of a traditional sports broadcasting background. And someone actually reached out to me. I am here with Steven, who is a traditional sports broadcaster for hockey. Did I get that right? Are you doing any other sports?
Not at this point, it's just hockey. I'm one of the event MCs for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah. So he reached out to me and he's like, I heard that. I thought maybe like I'm kind of, the guy you're talking about. And I was like, yeah, that actually does sound interesting. So thank you so much for actually reaching out.
Of
It
course,
was very cool of you.
no problem. Happy
So,
to be here. Are you kidding me? This is like a top 5 career moment for me at this point right now.
yeah, I bet.
Of
I appreciate it though. I
course.
love your backgrounds. It's a
Oh,
pretty
thank
sick
you.
background.
Yeah, this was all picked up at different Comic Cons throughout the Tampa Bay area, and like every time they'd come through town, I'd grab like a Terran decal, a Zerg decal, a Protoss decal, and then eventually turn it into some arts and crafts there.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
So you came in because, of course, you did know me from StarCraft.
I did. I do. I'm a StarCraft 2 player. Again, my ladder rank would not show it in the diamond leagues, but it's progress. I'm chipping away a little bit at a time, and chipping away up until you get proxied, and then you knock down 3 points or 3 ladder ranks, and you're like, all right, this is gonna be okay. We'll figure it out. We'll have a nice macro game next time, maybe. And then
Yeah,
you know how
maybe.
it is. The ladder anxiety is fascinating to me, and how that feels to try and even just climb it. It's such a great aspect of sports.
Yeah, but I mean, have you ever felt that for like traditional sports? I don't think I ever have.
Not really. The difference to me, like growing up playing sports, it was the ranking system is just you're in a division and you
Hmm.
play one game and it might be one game a week or a couple games over a weekend. And if you win and you feel great. And if you lose, you go back to the drawing board and you figure things out. There's no immediately like if I lost a hockey game in college, it wasn't just all right, well, I'm going to go play another hockey game here in 5 minutes and try and figure out what just happened. And then, if you get cannon rushed like 3 minutes later, let me hop into another game and try and figure it out. Not maybe send all my SCBs to try and defend this time. Um, it's different with hockey. It's different with other sports. You kind of have to dwell on it. And sometimes for days and in instances where I lost a big game or our team lost a big game in college or high school, it was you might have 6 months to think about something and really analyze like everything down to I should have made this pass at this time to I'm never eating macaroni and cheese before a game ever again. Ever again.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like the pacing of it is so different. Like I did a bunch of sports growing up. My dad always wanted us to do competitive sports, so
Okay.
I pretty much done everything except hockey.
All right.
Didn't want to invest the money. I think was one of the
Yeah.
big things
Yeah, it's it's
from my
it's
parents.
definitely one of the barriers to entry is startup cost, and then the maintaining of it is it's something because I didn't really play ice hockey till I was into adulthood. I was playing roller hockey all from elementary school through college.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe some PE stuff, right? But that
Right.
was
Yeah.
yeah, that's like in the gymnasium.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a very different feeling. There's really no feeling like it because StarCraft is also one of the unique games that is. I feel like it's unique because it is shorter than longer.
Yeah.
Fighting games actually can be pretty short, but even they can have like long rounds or many rounds, I should say. But StarCraft, it really is like between 5 minutes and of an enraging cannon rush or a 30, 45-minute enraging turtle Terran.
Yeah.
There's like very different extremes.
Right.
So just like constantly, the only thing they do better is just to jump into that pool over and over and over and over
Mhm.
again. So,
Yeah.
so drastically different.
Well, and it's fascinating too because you start experiencing I hate to use this word, but it is the truth because it's how I feel. It's heartbreaking. Like there are times where I remember when I was just kind of discovered what StarCraft could be as far as an online community. And I was just trying to get from gold to platinum in Terran and getting one win away from platinum and then going on a 9 game losing streak and being right back to the middle of like gold league and having to really find within yourself like do I even want to play this anymore? Like the options are like do I give up and just like maybe I should just do other things? Or is it like, no, 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 no. I'm I have to get better at this. I have to figure out what I could have done differently. And that introspection, I think, is extremely important. And it's one of the gifts of StarCraft that it really does give back to you is like feel that pain or frustration, sit with it for a second, then move forward. Figure out what you're going to do to fix it because anyone can sit and dwell on the negative. But if you can take a second and be like critical in a good way, just say like, what could I have done? Just all right, maybe 16 gas, not 17 gas. Little things like that. It's really helpful, especially for life. Start really breaking things down like that.
I think the other thing that's unique to StarCraft or general like video games is that there's no breaking down the practice as much as there are in traditional sports, right? So for
Right.
basketball, you can do, I mean, cardio is going to be one thing you can do. So start doing laps. There's shooting, there's dribbling, there's passing, and then there's also tactics you're gonna have to learn. Like you can actually do those individually. Where for StarCraft, I mean, technically you can go into like a Marine split challenge,
Sure.
or you can, learn a build against an AI, which is certainly one of the most impactful things. But it's not you can't be like, okay, can rush me over and over again to even a friend because it's not really genuine, not even close to what's going to happen because the can rush is always going to be a little bit different. Different players are going to do weird things like and so you get like a much like you get to kind of feel StarCraft out a little bit more can add to some of the interest of learning StarCraft, but also to some of the frustrations to learning StarCraft.
Certainly. Absolutely.
Kind of makes it almost like a soft skill in a way,
Yeah.
which we can bring it back to commentary
Sure.
is also what's kind of frustrating about commentary, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
it's a soft skill. It's something that you're not going to study. You're not going to get a book out and then learn and then be like, I know what I'm going to do. So it is a lot of just like diving headfirst into the pool and doing it over and over and over again. So for most of the esports broadcasters in the world, basically, I can say this, pretty confidently. Most of us just literally were like, well, I guess I make a YouTube channel. I just keep doing it. Like that is how everyone starts
It's
for
the
the most
path of
part.
least resistance, and it's not a bad medium at all.
No, but it is, it's not. No one's really guiding you. You can try and emulate some of the people who have figured things out, but no one's guiding you. Whereas in I think traditional sports does have a little bit more of a line of ascension. Like you can actually kind of see where you can start and where you can end up with. I mean, and this is where I'm going to let you talk because I don't actually know what I'm talking about. But for me, I imagine you start from like a high school football game, maybe the high school you went to if you live close by. You're like, hey, you're looking for an announcer, and then you move on to some type of like radio company is probably not the right word, but anyways, some radio broadcasting and I don't know,
No,
so on and
yeah,
so
that's right.
forth,
Yeah.
right? And then that's like there is a bit of progression that because traditional sports broadcasting has been around for 100 years, bit less, I suppose. But yeah, like there's something there to kind of follow. Where esports is literally, if you include Brood War, sure, it's
Yeah.
it's 30 years old. But as far as like the actual, the big explosion of esports, it's more like 10 years old, honestly. So you coming from traditional sports broadcasting background, what is your story? How did you get to where you are now?
Okay. So it's untraditional. Most of the people that I work with or I've worked alongside went to broadcasting, communications, journalism, and that was their path. They knew what they were doing, and that was it. And I was in college, and it was so to be completely transparent about it, it was I was looking for internships, and I had just gone through a classic 20 something year old breakup with a girl. And it was the summer when I was 20 turning 21, and it was just a rough time. I was questioning everything, the decisions I was making, and I was just every little thing that could have been picked apart about myself, about the universe, I was doing it. And it was pretty unhealthy to a degree. It was natural in a lot of ways, but unhealthy over a certain amount of time. And I had decided that the summer was coming up. I wasn't going to repeat that. I wasn't going to be like mopey and I wasn't going to be down on myself. I was going to find something to do. And I had looked for internships. I was a sport management major in college, and I looked for internships with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And it was almost I don't want to say it was a long shot, but it was beyond a long shot. I don't really have any connections in the industry. My mom teaches the first grade, and my dad was an accountant, and it was just this thing where I was like, shot in the dark. Let's apply for one with the Lightning. And it just happened to be one of those instances where they had decided, hey, this summer, this is going to be one of our first summer internship classes. And we're going to have like 30 interns and come on in and interview. So I need you, for the people that are listening out there, to understand like your chances and the opportunities you get when you get a chance, just take it, celebrate it. Because the interview we celebrated, we didn't even celebrate a potential job offer or anything like that. I went in for an internship interview with corporate sponsorship, and it was one of the first professional interviews I'd ever had. All my jobs in high school and college were with mom and pop places and, clean this, fix this, that kind of a job, that kind of an upbringing. Nothing like formal, like put on your suit and tie and go in for this job interview. And it was a razor's edge by how I got the interview and how I got the job. It was in corporate sponsorship, and it was so tight where I interviewed on Sunday and they offered me the position, I think on Monday or Tuesday, for just a classic summer internship that you would think about for a college kid. And 2 days after that, I was interviewed by 5 people, and I think 4 of them had been let go. So when I'm telling people out there, like when you have an opportunity and like your window is there, take it, and be thankful. And if you see something like that happens where you're like, oh my God, I barely got in here, be thankful and do everything you can. And so my first year there, I was in corporate sponsorship, which was just writing up sponsorship agreements. Like Chili's agrees to pay $50,000 and the Lightning agree to put up Chili's signs like baby back ribs are back around the arena during the second period 3 times. And that was my job. It was like copy paste the name of the company, copy paste the dollar amount, copy and paste what graphic design team would do, and then go make a million copies because that's intern life. And it was phenomenal. I think about that summer pretty frequently because it was a lot of like learning. Like, okay, this is when people say the real world, this is the real world. And I was very lucky. My boss at the time was great. And he was not that much older than me. I think he was probably 28 and I was 21 at the time. And he was really helpful in us understanding like what professionalism is, what being a good worker is, what being a good office mate is. Like, are you fun to hang out with? Because we're going to be together for 8 hours today. Are you fun to hang out with? And from there, my entrance into broadcasting or into the event MCs is more accurate of what I do because I'm live in the arena or outside of the arena usually. I that summer I did like a Harry Carey impression for someone and they heard it. And for anyone in the esports industry that's not familiar with Harry Carey was a baseball announcer for the Chicago Cubs for years, years and years and years. He would sometimes indulge in the sauce, and some of the funniest on-air commentary you ever heard. So he would just you've probably seen Will Ferrell do him. It's big glasses. Hey everybody, Harry Carey here. And he would be like, Moises Alou up to the plate. Did you know Alou backwards is Uola? I had no idea. And like mid-game, that's how they would segment up baseball. And I did that to someone like one of the interns, and the intern who was I think he was a couple years older than me was just having me do it to random people around the office. And at one point I did it for the VP of game presentation. And over the course of the next 2 years I ended up working within the youth hockey department and doing camps and things like that. But they would pull me aside and be like, "Hey, yell into this camera. Just go yell. We need you to go yell into this camera right now." And I'd be like, "What am I yelling?" And they'd be like, "Yell, we're storming downtown." And then I would get right in the camera with this face and just be like, "We're storming downtown, baby. Woo!" And things like that. and they would just pull me out of like whatever we were doing, like, go yell, go do this. And eventually that got me a spot on like their energy team. I wasn't even like a full-time employee. Um, I was just a guy on the energy team and I had another whole other day job, but I was living the best of both worlds. I had a day job in the finance industry, which I enjoyed at the time. And then after work, I would go straight to Amalie Arena and get to do things in front of 20,000 people and make a fool of myself, shoving my head through pizza boxes, being in dance competitions on the ice. Whatever they asked me to do, I was all about it. And eventually, uh, they were like, here's a microphone. We have an idea for doing these things called watch parties. We're going to go to a restaurant or we're going to go to like a local sports bar. We're going to watch the game and we want you to commentate on the action in between commercial breaks. So we'll have the play by play on the air that's breaking down everything as it happens. And then you're going to have 2.5 minutes where we need you to break down exactly what you saw in very simple terms, read off the sponsorship material that you need to cover, thank everyone for coming, so on and so forth, and then get it right back to the action. They didn't want there to be a segmenting of like, all right, downtime. Let's all relax. It was like, no, keep it going, keep it pushing, let's keep going. And that grew from let's do a local sports bar and a restaurant with 50 people to we've done them for the playoffs in front of 10,000 people. And that's been my career so far. It's gone from that to doing in arena hosting. I've done public address. So every time you've ever been somewhere and it's like, please drive home safely. That's been me on more than one occasion. And my role right now is out in front of the arena every home game day. I'm explaining basically like a breakdown of what you can expect in the game tonight, both from on the ice as far as the action, the matchups, the players, so on and so forth, their history, all the way through what's going on out in front of the arena. Is the Humane Society there? Is one of our local sponsors, who is one of Advent Health, doing local health promotions, health screenings, so on and so forth. And it's this beautiful balancing act of like talking about the present, talking about the future, keeping everyone engaged, letting it breathe when it needs to. And I've been there now in that capacity for 7 years, but in 11 years total. Um, and extremely thankful for all of it. And we're in weird times right now, but in a special way, they're just as special, for lack of a better word, as we're fine tuning what next season is going to look like. And it's fun because I hate to call it fun when there's so much hardship going on right now. It's more of a it's how are we going to respond? And we're all think tanking right now about what next season's going to look like if we can't have fans in the arena. And there's some, I guess, something to be thankful for in that. Staying safe, looking after your loved ones, being responsible, and looking forward to how we can improve this going into next year. And that's my story.
It's a very cool story.
No, thank you.
So definitely one of the more unorthodox ones. I mean, you kind
Yeah.
of started off that saying that a lot of your friends or the people in the industry did what sounds more like a typical one, which is like
Hmm.
starting off with not journalism, but
Communications.
broadcasting.
Yeah.
And yeah, communications. There we go. I mean, I do know it's getting more and more popular, I would say, but still not. Esports still isn't that popular, and
Hmm.
these jobs aren't exactly going to be streamlined anytime soon. But I do know it's more popular to have people with some of that background coming into esports and kind of adapting to the esport as opposed to just bringing people up from esports nerds basically
Hmm.
and
Right.
saying like, oh, you
Right.
have a knack for this. So I do think that might change in the future. But yeah, starting off with the broadcasting school and then kind of, I guess, moving your way forward is I've always wondered what exactly that entailed
Hmm.
as far as education goes. I don't know if you've ever talked to anyone that you've
Sure.
worked with. Is like, did they ever tell you what they learn, or did they ever give you any feedback on what you have to, I guess, work on technically?
Right. Well, I'm very lucky with as far as my boss at the arena is world renowned. His name is John Franzone, and John is known for being just extremely detail oriented. And I usually seek out his advice and his input, and quite frankly, usually he'll give it to me without asking, which is fantastic because John gets to the point with me, and I'm very lucky to have a mentor like that. Um, I One of my favorite moments with him, I saw him at an event we were doing for like a tree lighting in downtown Tampa. And I'm talking and I am feeling like as confident as I possibly can be because I'm feeling like I'm doing well. I'm in the moment. I'm streamlined. And John's there, and I'm like, yes, he sees me succeeding. It's happening. He sees me succeeding. This is a Christmas miracle, everyone, as we light this tree. Fantastic. And I get off the stage, and he's smiling at me, and he just goes, "You're popping your P's and T's." And I go, "What's that? What's that mean?" And he's like, "You're popping your P's and T's. You're holding the microphone in front of your face. We can handle the volume. Put the microphone down in front of your chin and let the air pass over the diaphragm of the microphone. So you're popping your P's and T's, Stephen." And he quoted Animal House, and he goes, "A pledge pin." And I was so thankful because I could tell the vein from which it was coming was not, "I'm here to cut you down." The vein, and it was to the point. "You're doing great. I don't need to tell you anything else. Don't pop your P's and T's. Hold the mic right here." And I'm very fortunate to have someone like that because I think the classical education, from what I've been told, it's helpful in getting you exposure to, like, this is what this person sounds like. This is how this person conducts business. This is how a traditional interview might be structured, how you can ask questions. But I didn't want to be a communications major in college, or a broadcasting major. It's funny that I ended up doing this for a living, because I didn't think I was going to. I had been sort of getting pushed that way, and I was like, I don't know, I don't want to be a newscaster. I felt like that was the end path. Was like, I'll do this, and then I can tell you about the news. And I didn't want to do that. There's nothing wrong with that profession whatsoever. It's not for me. I wanted to do this, whatever it was, as authentically as possible. I wanted to make sure that I was myself and that I wasn't emulating somebody else or pretending to be somebody else, because then there's a standard set of, I want to be like this person. So I'm going to keep improving to be like that person. When the reality needs to be, how am I improving myself? And I can pick up things I like from other people about, like, wow, I like how that person talks on the air. I like how this person breaks down the action. Um, but I was leery of being in a classroom being told this is how you need to do it. And yes, I do know the irony of that is me being my day job being a teacher. I understand that. But one of the things I do in my classroom again is like, be yourself, be authentic, be true to yourself, and you'll find yourself on the right path. Because as you refine yourself, you'll find yourself refining in a certain direction. So I avoided that path a little bit. I wanted my I almost called it my art, and that would have been just a little too smug for my liking. Um, I didn't want my performance to be influenced by a lot of other things other than what was extremely important to me. And that's pretty much why I avoided it and just seek out advice from very specific people.
Yeah, I do think that again going back to kind of like the soft skill talk at the beginning, I think it's a field that's going to attract a lot of people who don't want to be structured.
Sure.
People who necessarily weren't doing that great in school, like good enough, they were smart, but they didn't really want to do the homework and all that type of stuff.
Right.
Seemed that they would, go in that direction, which also would turn them off from sometimes plenty of people didn't actually go to university, even though it's still very advisable
You're right.
in the
Yeah, sure.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they were kind of like along those lines. Famously, Tasteless never finished college, although he took many courses and studied many things and is a very smart person.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think it does attract some of that person. And I never mind structured personally. I did well in school because I was kind of just naturally, I mean, to say I'm naturally smart is a very smug thing to say indeed. But I think what it is that I knew how to take tests.
Okay.
So I always would do well with tests. The things I didn't do well was something like French, where I didn't study at all. I clearly did not do well there, right? But
Yeah.
otherwise, I was okay. So I wouldn't have mind going into something structured, but of course, for me, I didn't want to be up on the camera. I came up from being a shy, reserved kid who was very not self confident and all that good stuff. So this was never an idea for me. Going back, like looking back on it now, I'm turning 30, I guess, in like a year or so. But
Okay.
I was like, man, if I could, if it wasn't so damn expensive, I feel like it'd be fantastic to add on broadcasting classes just to learn some of these technicalities. Because as soon as you said that guy was like, you're popping your P's, I know what that means because I've taken some voice acting whatnot lessons, but that's the feedback that you're not really going to find that often amongst esports. So apparently it's moving more that direction. Like I've heard rumors, and one day I'm going to get one of these League of Legends commentators to confirm for me. But
Yeah,
other people have talked about how League of Legends now has coaches, so they're basically approaching it like a little bit of the news anchor thing. So how do you appear on the desk, and where's the banter? Write your scripts beforehand type thing, and then
sure.
also the professionalism as well as the actual anything, the technicalities that we don't usually think of are what you're going to get from that traditional background of actually going to school. But then if you can find someone who's either done that and can tell you in a easier, simpler, less expensive format, or is so intuitive that they figured it out so they can tell you before you have to spend months and months before you realize, oh, that's what I'm doing wrong, is always ideal. And it really is lucky that you have a mentor like that. Because honestly, in StarCraft too, I don't think we talk to each other a lot, and some of the casters and I really do a lot of talking, as you can see with this podcast. But yeah, the technical aspects, even amongst the people who are trying to direct us, the directors and the producers, I don't think I've ever had anyone come in and be like, "Your mic positioning is poor." Like, maybe the sound engineers, if it's really bad, they'll be like, "Move your mic." But yeah, I've never gotten feedback like that. So that is kind of what like I like hearing about when I talk to people from different backgrounds is how much they've gotten at the technicalities of it. So as you've worked on your performance, as you put it,
Yeah.
how much of it has been digging into the technical underside of things?
Well, it really turns into the technical side needing to be, in my opinion, maybe the last 10% that takes you over the top into being hardwired, as far as let your performance be what it is, be authentic. And then that last technical 10% makes you look refined, like the popping of the P's and T's, knowing where your cameras are, things like that, knowing who your audience is, not breaking eye contact when you're giving an interview. All of those little pieces, like as far as the technical side goes, I think are the big ones. Um, I'm curious though for esports, is are you able to go to either other commentators or producers and ask for feedback? Is that even like a two-way street that occurs, or is it provided unprovoked?
Well, amongst the internet, it is, but
Right, of course.
um, no, this has been a topic on this podcast before, and like the thing is that it's not very normal. I would say, part of the problem is that there's not because I feel like it's not even just that it's, talking is a soft skill and it's hard to say exactly what went wrong when you talked, but it's also just like you're talking about esports, which is very new. Yeah, there's a lot of that missing element of like, well, that is clearly wrong, right? And then we've talked about it. I think the thing that all of us have figured out basically is that the best approach would be the most lovely approach ever, if it actually happened, would be to sit down after a cast, after a day, which keep in mind is like a billion casts, so it's kind of hard.
Right,
But after
right.
a day, and be like, what are we working towards, and can we push ourselves more that direction? Right? It's an us versus them. Not well, that's not correct, but it's not. I'm not bringing you down. It's that we're working together towards a goal is always going to be that best feedback. But honestly, right now, no, it basically never happens. If you ask someone for feedback, and I know like Fear Dragon talked a lot about this because he's the one that's been trying to do it a lot. I don't necessarily ask for feedback that much, but he would tell you that it's difficult to get a response, and not because people are trying to keep him down or that they don't care or whatever, but it's actually I think surprisingly a lot of onus is put on the person you're asking feedback for, and whether they see themselves in a role that is capable of telling you yes no is also like really questionable, because we all feel kind of like beginners, and we all kind of are like, well, I guess I like doing this, but you could be totally, it's fine if you do. Like there's not really that hard line of yes or no. So to answer your question, TLDR, no, there's not a lot of feedback, and unfortunately a lot of the people who are capable of being a little detached, not our co-caster or not a fan or something like that. The people who are going to watch the entire program, they're going to have more of the macro vision and be able to say you need to work more towards that. Like they got so many hats to wear in esports that the last thing on their mind is basically casters. I'm so bold to say.
Hmm.
And then the last thing on their mind about casters is giving feedback to casters. So
Which is
we're kind
interesting
of
to
down
me
there.
because you're the mouthpiece for the event, for everything that's happening, and especially in a game like StarCraft, where there is basically that 2 to 3 minute gap in the beginning of the game where you might have some scouting and some harassment. And then eventually it just escalates exponentially into here's a dual prong drop, here's a scout, here's a tech switch, all these things going on. You would think that there would want to be that teamwork and camaraderie to make sure, hey, we're focusing on all these things as they happen all at once. Let's find a way to work together and have even like a shorthand of ways. But I wanted to ask you on this as well, with how new esports is relatively speaking. Do you kind of feel like you're in the Wild West with all that's happening right now? Like, what are the rules? We're kind of making them as we go along this frontier. Is that the vibe in there, or is it something different?
It absolutely is. It was more Wild West. Back in the day, Brood War was literally just like, can you afford to go to Korea? Can you live on rice? Which is what Artosis did. And then for StarCraft 2, it was the Wild West, as in there was plenty of people who were overeager, like in 2010, I should say. There were people who were overeager and over promising and under delivering. And then there was the opposite problem would happen, and then you would have people who wouldn't pay right, or the industry standard would be, well, you're passionate about this, so why do I have to pay you? All the problems of being like a freelance artist, plus being on the broadcast that can last 10 plus hours because you don't have overtimes kind of thing, obviously. So it was more Wild West back then. Just literally, can I even trust the guy I'm talking to? God, I
Right,
hope he gets me my flight.
right.
Now I'd still say it is the Wild West, but a lot of things have been pushed forward because of those early pioneers, I guess,
Yeah.
continuing with the analogy. Like the beginner casters of StarCraft 2 certainly helped that. A lot of our casters were pretty. A lot of the early, casters that we still have talked a lot about trying to push their way forward and having to combat this whole like, well, you're unless you're esport or you're passionate about it, so I'm not going to pay you as much. And then I think with esports that are really huge, the League of Legends, the Dota, the Overwatch, the whatever, they're pushing it really far forward in terms of getting closer to like the traditional sports broadcasting, which also it entails a lot of professionalism, but it also entails hopefully like some safety as well. Like contracts get more detailed and they actually get upheld. There's actually
Hmm.
some downsides if a company doesn't do something.
Right. And I remember, I think was it on your podcast? It was either, I think Artosis, might have been Tasteless. They were talking about just having representation and then being told that a certain amount of money is coming, and then it's just gone. It's not there. It was like, nope, you did all this work and you're going to get nothing for it other than exposure, even though it shouldn't be that at that point.
Yeah, Artosis talked about how like they thought they had an agent. Is kind of what it boiled down to. They thought they
Right.
did, but it just like it didn't go very well. So I would say agents are kind of becoming very standard in esports,
Hmm.
but as usual, there's going to be the crappy agents, the overpromising agents, and then some agents aren't going to be worth it as well.
Hmm.
It's definitely going to be the case for some people.
Right. Are you finding though with either getting representation or choosing to not have representation? Personally, at this point, I've gone in a direction where I'm just representing myself and eh, to a degree. I've got some advisors and I've got some people that are close to me that have been very helpful. Um, but are you finding that you're finding your own path and maybe that's the most important way of doing this? Or is there another way you think of just like maybe I need an agent, I need to start going that way?
The biggest thing that an agent could do for me is that they basically are the hype man. ZombieGrub as me right now would be like, well, what can you bring us? And I'd be like, well, I'm kind of smart, and I can kind of speak well, so
Right.
you got that going for you.
Hmm.
Whereas the hype man comes in and they're like, she's done this event and that event, and she's been a professional for over 10 years, and whatever. Unfortunately, what I've heard is that basically agents a lot of times just come more down to the technical aspects. So I think Nate's talked about it, how it's he actually finds it really helpful that they do the paperwork for him.
Hmm. Right.
Because they're also not doing just like the technical aspects of paperwork. They're also the people who can actually throw down the gloves if you're not getting paid. I haven't had so much of a problem with that, but he has done many more like jobs than I ever had. So
Right. And I understand that feeling too, because at this point, I'm afraid to even say it. I've been very lucky with booking my own things, or the Lightning have been extremely instrumental in throwing my name into a hat for more than one thing that I had no uh like shot in otherwise, and then booking it because the Lightning recommended me. But I haven't had an issue with payment yet, and I think that's part of why I've continued to just be no representation. And it's also, I don't feel pressure to book something that I don't want to do. I'm very strict about a lot of things. You and I talked briefly over email before this, and one of the first things I told you is like my social media presence is almost non-existent, and that is not like that's a tactical move. That is a purposeful. I don't want to do too much self promotion. There's a part of it where self promotion is absolutely key with what we do. I try to make it so if it pops up, it's like, wow, when was the last time this guy posted? 2017. Okay, wow. All right, so this must be something that's on his mind or something pressing. Um, but again, I'm tangential to a Tampa Bay Lightning game, whereas with you guys, I'm curious how much more pressure there is to be on social media, because it's your YouTube channel. It's everything that you're going to be doing for StarCraft 2. It's running through your YouTube channel. You are not just a brand, but like your channel is a brand on top of it. Is there a pressure there with social media to stay involved?
I don't think there's really a pressure to be like tweeting or having an Instagram.
Mhm.
I think back in the day of like 2012, it actually was a pretty big deal. I don't know if they ever negotiated with it, but it was kind of a big deal. A lot of people were coming to the stream via Twitter, and
Okay.
it's very different now. We've actually talked a little bit about that, but that no, not so much. But as far as having a brand, I mean, I think it's more important for StarCraft people because we don't have basically Tastosis are the only full time jobs that were possible, and even they are now streaming, right? So we've always had to have a brand for the Twitch aspect, which yes, you're going to have to do social media to be a Twitch streamer. So yeah, there is that. But then I think everyone else you can ever think of that got popular in esports, most of them are going to come up because they eventually tweeted at the right person. Someone tweeted in favor of them eventually, or something like that happened, right? Because there is no interview process
Right.
that I have ever heard of. I could be wrong, but and it might be changing as well. Especially when it comes to some of the tangential might be the right word, but like some of the roles that aren't seen as much as a passion role.
Hmm.
If you're an analyst, you better be the most passionate, homegrown guy from that esport. But if you're an interviewer, you can kind of be like whatever. People aren't going to be angry because that happens if you come from another sport. Yeah, they're going to get angry at you.
Right.
So, anyways, yeah, but I think that's the only time I've ever heard of anyone like coming up just because they asked or they were like, "I'm good at this. Here's what I can do." Otherwise, it's been like after years of hard work and just
Right.
eventually getting in all the right minds so that when you're asked like, "What do you think of this guy?" They go, "Oh yeah, 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 sure, I've heard of him. I've heard of stuff." So yeah, yeah, there is kind of a on if you're on the up and coming, like I guess it would be important for someone who's up and coming in StarCraft, from my experience. But as far as people who are already in StarCraft, like a me or a Roddy or a Maynard, like I don't think we care at
Sure.
all. In fact, you could ask Maynard, and I think he would say he doesn't care at all.
Right. Which is interesting. And the next level beyond that, by the way, is staying out of the comments section. Is that something that you kind of stay away from, or have you ever ventured down and just scrolled down into the YouTube to see like what are they saying?
I'm not the worst person at this, but I'm not the best either.
Okay.
I go to Reddit. I go usually my tactic is to go about halfway down a comment thread and then just
Uh-huh.
be like, well, everything that's downvoted isn't worth reading.
Okay.
But definitely I've gone down to the deep depth. I have looked at YouTube, but oh my god, every time I do it, maybe like once a year, I'm like, oh, why did I ever do this? It's terrible.
Just do it around Halloween and like keep it in line with all the other horror movies, and you'll be good to go. It's perfect.
The true horror movie is
Yeah.
looking up your name in the
Oh
comments.
my god. So I got lucky actually with trolling at one point. I was this was 5 years ago, 2015. The Lightning were in the Stanley Cup Finals, and that's like the championship for the National Hockey League. And at that point, the NHL media and every sport outlet descends on whoever the hometown arena is. And this was still when I was on the energy team. I was doing the watch parties when the team was on the road, and then when we were there, I was in the arena like shooting the t-shirt cannon and everything. And I'm on the Zamboni shooting the t-shirt cannon, and NHL.com makes a GIF out of it, and it says, and yes, I said GIF. I'm going to continue to say it. Continue to correct me if anyone needs to. That's fine. I stay out of the comment section, so I won't even know. And it says it's t-shirt time in all capital letters, and I was being animated and getting because I'm excited and an excitable human being regardless. And the comments were actually really funny. Like there were some really funny people in there. But one of the comments I read, it said, I see this guy at every game. He creeps me out. Would hate to be his girlfriend. Hashtag ew. And I was, I like it hurt for a minute. I was like, ooh, oof. That's very specific that you would hate to be my girlfriend, which means you accepted being my girlfriend and then hated it. Um, and the lucky part is by sheer coincidence, I go to Starbucks by my old job. I'm waiting for a coffee, and someone behind me goes, "Why don't you have that many followers?" And I was like, "Sorry?" She's like, "It says you only have 6 followers on Twitter." And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't have a Twitter." And I looked and it was her. It
Really?
was the troll.
What?
And I was like, "Oh," she's like, "I was just kidding, right?" And I was like, "I guess." And I was like, "What are you doing here?" And she's like, "I work at the Apple store." And I was like, "This makes me feel so much better." There's nothing wrong with working at the Apple store at all. What it was is I got a name with a face for a person who worked a job. And in that moment, it was no longer the ether saying that I was undateable. It was an individual human that I put a name and a face to. And it was like, you're just another human. And now that I've met you, I will go back to ordering my grande iced coffee, and that's the end of it. And it's weird because I feel equipped to handle the comment section, but I purposely just stay out of it. Um, I think you need to have feedback and like a very important line of people that you trust. And I think with you guys in your industry, to talk to your fellow casters is so important because I don't think anyone understands what it's like to be in the driver's seat until you're in the driver's seat. And until you've experienced that, the comment section's irrelevant. There, you might have one or two people that have a good point here and there, but hey, broken watches right twice a day doesn't mean it is based in anything of value. Um, do you have any casters that you've worked with or talked with at this point where you've been like, man, thank God for that person being around because they make me better every time?
Yeah. I mean, as far as like thinking like when I'm casting with someone, like my God, like I have to go and reach their height right now. They're setting the pace and I need to catch up. Like that doesn't happen so much. But as far as people that I glad to call friends and I respect their opinion of and I do think do really good work. I mean, Maynard was certainly one of them. Was like a past tense. Is one of them where I like, and he has a very like approachable way of giving you feedback as well if you would really like it. I think part of it is Australian accent, but also he's a good guy.
It doesn't hurt.
And
Doesn't hurt his cause.
yeah, and then Tasteless has always been really amazing at this part of things, honestly, the whole like dealing with the community because you can really get bogged down as someone who kind of feels even the obligation to be part of the community because you are still trying to work your way up.
Mhm.
And then you go and like, meet Tasteless for coffee or something and he's just like, fuck those guys. And he like waves his hand and like just moves on. I'm like, and there's something about that that's actually
Yeah.
quite, it's philosophically like really, really encouraging.
Right.
But no, it's important to do that. And then In Control was very good at this type of stuff too. He was actually the person who would sit people down and be like, look, something's not right. Could you try to like, fix this? Where a lot of the rest of us are actually kind of wimps about it.
Mhm.
If something's going wrong, we're kind of just like, God, I wish you would stop doing that. But
Right. And that was one thing about him because I'm not in. I'm just from this point. I'm a fan of StarCraft too, and I never got to meet In Control or anyone like that. when I watched him, I had to explain to someone like he was majestic. That was like watching a lion be the alpha, and to have that someone who had your back like that, that's a tremendous asset. What a great, yeah, fantastic caster, and the fantastic caster compliments will continue because I'm not behind the scenes. I can't give any type of insight. I just have to know. Have you ever seen in any other industry any two commentators that have chemistry like Artosis and Tasteless in anything?
No, I pay attention to quite a few
Me
different
neither.
esports.
Mhm.
Just to like, I like seeing the pageantry of some of them, and I like seeing the approach of some others. So like Rainbow Six, I know a decent amount of the casters. For Overwatch, I watch it probably the most of any other esport. I really respect the hell out of those casters because
Sure.
Overwatch is fucking insane. But I've watched some League of Legends highlights, some CS:GO highlights. Like Smix always talking about how good the casters are, and these lists of like fighting games. Anyways, like the list goes on, and every single time I've been like, yeah. I mean, so many of them don't approach it the same way. Just like the way that certain casters and certain esports, or I should say, the way that certain esports decide how to approach their casting is actually fascinating. Because like
Right.
Rainbow Six, for instance, I was able to meet Parker, who's one of the like kind of like the tastosis or the
Okay.
artosis of the tastosis for them,
Sure.
and Kickstar, I think is the other guy's name. And I think he's very good. But when I listen to the broadcasting, and they are considered the GOAT commentary team by like most people, right? I listen to it and I'm like, this doesn't jive with me. But apparently, this is exactly what Rainbow Six people want, or like Dota. I watch the Dota analysts, and I think they're actually, well, I don't want to say that they're terrible, but they're not my cup of tea
Okay. That's fair. Fair.
sometimes,
Yeah.
because they really is just like they brought some guy who's good with knowledge, and you bring him on a camera and he looks like he's on a camera. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like it
Sure.
just doesn't look very nice.
Yeah.
But that's what they want. That's absolutely what they want. So they're doing the right thing. So to go back to your point about like you're never gonna know the industry and like looking for feedback online is totally incorrect. You're absolutely correct about that. Especially if you do have someone who comes in from different esport and it's
Yeah.
like they don't do it this way. Why do I don't do it that way? Because it's actually just not what's done.
Yeah. Because it does feel like Taste Toast is just from watching it. And again, I've been around sports my entire life and watching sports growing up and watching esports now really over the last 5 or 10 years. I've never seen chemistry like that. I've just never seen it. It's like the one thing I've equated it to on a couple of occasions is like when you take I'm a big Metallica fan, and like when you separate out Metallica, like they're all great, but when they get together, it's like, what is happening? This is insanity. I mean, they're funny. They're relaxed. You can tell, at least and if it's a complete acting job, bravo, the Oscar goes to them. They are enjoying themselves and they're enjoying being together, and that's the biggest lesson I've learned from watching them is going to an event like if you're having fun, people are going to have fun. Even if I say the read wrong, if I stutter a word, if I say a sentence twice in a row because I lose my line on the teleprompter or if I lose my line on my paper script, if I'm having fun and being thankful, quite honestly, for being there, people are going to pick up on that. And I think that's such a great lesson from just watching them is like they're having fun. This is supposed to be fun. Have fun.
Yeah. They're definitely the best at that. And they're like I think what you talked about earlier too about the whole technicality part being like a 10%, difference is pretty true. Like people, they sometimes there's something you can't explain about someone that you really like, and that is actually the 10%, technical aspect, but you can't put it into words. Sometimes that happens, but most of the time, as long as you're having fun, like people just tend to like you then and there, right? People, it's their gut, it's not their mind. Usually, that's telling them what to do here.
Mhm.
And if you just continue working with that in mind, you're probably going to be more appreciated in general as an entertainer, like
Right.
for any of these jobs. So it also does absolutely help with like the whole not getting progressively worse the more you think about messing up.
right.
That's what we were all doing in high school when we messed up
Sure.
our presentation, and then we
Yeah.
just got worse afterwards.
It's
But
that spiral. The second you
yeah.
start feeling like, "Oh god, I can't believe I messed that word up," and then you're thinking about the word you just messed up, and then you messed up another one, and then it really can go down quickly. And you've gotta learn how to cut with the expression I use is cut with a scalpel, not an axe. Like, if you mess up, just it's okay. You're a fallible human just like everyone else. Get over it. Move on. Go on to the next thing. You'll be fine. And I think that was a big growth for me, honestly, because if I used to, it still, quite honestly, still happens. If I feel like I had a bad show at the arena, I'm not consolable. I'm not like lashing out or anything like that, but I'm not going to feel better until I can get on that stage again and show you, like, no, 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 I'm gonna, I'm here for a reason because I give everything I've got into this. And some days you don't get enough sleep, you don't have enough water, you just got off of the phone with someone and it was a bad conversation, and sometimes you take that stuff up on stage with you because you're human. And I think that's a big thing is learning how to be nice to yourself.
Yeah, that is a pretty big thing for like general life stuff,
Yeah,
or being broad.
absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is it like that when you get off the air ever? Are you just like, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
All right. You're normal. Good job.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
I am Katowice. It was kind of like me and Maynard were, I guess, like borderline bummers of the event.
You think
We, were, we
so?
weren't we weren't actually, but like
No.
basically like after an event, we all were like we need to get a drink or something, and then we were
Sure.
kind of like doing the whole like, no, I'm bad, no, I'm bad, you're great, no, you're bad, no,
Well, it is, yeah, you don't, we're looking at this though through the eyes of casters. We're not looking at this through the eyes of spectators. And that's really the challenge is because you might be looking at yourself as like, oh my God, I cut off Maynard 2 times, or Maynard might be thinking something completely different, like, oh man, I repeated the observation twice, or whatever the case may be. And the reality is most people are just don't want you to get in the way. And you guys have, I've never watched a cast where I've been like, Zombie Grub's in the way of this one, or Maynard, or Pig, or any of those guys. It's always a good supplement. I think that's the big thing that we are unaware of, that the 10% technical aspect is only the 10%, and everyone else is looking at the other 90.
I wonder, like, since you obviously are into hockey and
Sure.
you've apparently listened to a lot of sports broadcasters, you've
Yeah.
been referencing a couple. Like, do you ever like think of that when you watch the esports commentary? And do you have a preference? Do you think that one is actually like, factually better than the other? Do you think there's any influence between the two going on right now?
That's a really good question. I would say the main difference is there's a crescendo in esports. There's always like a starting point, and then there's a build up and a build up and a build up. And, in StarCraft, it's like it's that point where like armies start colliding, and then it's boom, 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 and then GG and it's over. And in traditional sports, in hockey, it's riding the ebbs and flows of the game. The second the puck drops, it's like everyone's kind of already on the edge of their seats, and like a goal can get scored at any minute. 10 seconds in, the score might be 1-0. In StarCraft, there's not going to be a GG in 10 seconds unless something's gone horribly wrong. Um, like you miss your first 2 drones or SCVs, whatever the case might be. That's not happening. I think in esports, there's a pacing that has to happen where like your adrenaline probably dumps pretty hard. And you have that feeling of like, oh my God, I want to fill every space of second with the most eloquent content on God's green earth that's ever been spoken, and just weave together a tapestry of beautiful syntax and prose that everyone will think of. And in reality, that might be the point in which, like, oh well, if they're just droning up right now, I'm gonna go get a snack. So while I'll get a snack, and they're not even listening in till the battle starts, right? And in pro sports, I think everyone's kind of watching until there's a commercial break, and then everyone gets up and goes and does their own thing, goes and uses the restroom, whatever. And in pro sports, I should say traditional sports, there's that filling the gap in downtime is very similar to filling that downtime in esports, where there's a change in strategy and explaining that shift. explaining what is happening as far as this is. You see, I have a visitor right here.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy. Um, in understanding what shift is going to be happening, in understanding, all right, in StarCraft, this is a tech switch, right? They were doing Roach Hydra, now they're going Spire, right? In hockey, if there's a timeout, there's a purpose for that timeout. Hockey, you only get one timeout for the entire game. And it might be a moment of having to understand what the coach is telling his team at that point. Is he telling them like, settle down, stick to the game plan? We're too loose. You got to tighten this thing back up. Or it might just be to stop momentum. Like we were up 3-0 and now it's 3-2. I'm calling a timeout so they don't have the ability to get the puck and go score again. We're going to sit here, everyone get yourself back to neutral, or get in your face and be like, figure it out. You're grown men. You know what you're doing. You've been doing this all season. Figure it out. And as a caster, explaining what's happening, explaining strategy, explaining why something's happening at a certain point. And this is the one difference, I think, with esports and traditional sports that's really paramount is players in traditional sports, as much as we'd like to build them up to be superhuman, and their talents are. I've been on the ice with NHL players a lot in my life. Very, very lucky to have done that and to do it as frequently as I do. When they skate or when they shoot, it sounds different. There is a muscle optimization that is occurring that is fine tuned to a level beyond human comprehension. Like when I skate, it's like, and when these guys skate, it's because every quadricep muscle, every hamstring muscle, every muscle in their calves is dialed into skating. And then we as fans watch our team go forward. There's not a like, hey, this probe on this map builds faster. We have to keep track of this probe because this probe builds Nexi in 38 seconds instead of 70 seconds. Like that doesn't happen. And having to explain the difference of what is happening on a human level during the day, like was the team flight delayed? Did they have to fly through customs the night before? Was there some type of delay at the hotel, travel delay, whatever? In esports, it's all on that one player to manipulate everything that's on screen, manipulate every worker, manipulate every army unit. There's a lot that all gets focused on one person. But the beauty is you're able as an esports commentator to explain pure theory, explain the attacking unit and explain the counter unit. You can do that with hockey, but that human level comes in where you're like, what's wrong with him tonight? Or like, what's right with him tonight? That happens too, where you just see a player who, a big thing in hockey sometimes, or I've noticed in sports, is players who, like the day after their kid is born, will have a game and they light it up, goal after goal, and they're smiling from ear to ear. And it's like, of course he is. They've got a baby boy or girl at home now, and like they just want to have fun now because they've gotten a paradigm shift in their life of like, I get to go play hockey, and then I'm going to go home and I get to hang out with my mini human. This is the best day that's ever existed. And with esports, there's that difference. So I guess to give it to you, do you find it difficult? Because this is one of my things. I'm not good at, or I don't like to, quite frankly. I don't like critiquing players. Every time I talk about players, I'm finding the positive in whatever they do, whatever is happening on the ice. I understand that that is a person. Is it harder with esports though? Because it kind of all falls on that one person. Are you able to delineate that, or is it just you just focus it on the StarCraft? How does that work?
I mean, basically, you're gonna put a positive spin on everything that you can, because mistakes happen, but the game is so complicated that it's always a mistake that you probably didn't see as being caused by something else. And it's very difficult for even like a full team of analysts to break down something. So try and catch that in that moment, right? So you
Sure.
see a lot of casters be like, I'm not sure what made him do that, but it is incorrect, right? So I think a lot of us have gotten good about always putting that little bit of doubt of like, well, we're not just going to say, well, that was wrong and that's bad and he's bad. We're going to be like, well, that was probably incorrect, but maybe he was thinking this or that. I think it's because we have so much time to talk. And that's what I really liked about your initial like start to this was that there's different pacing to it, and esports as a whole has a different pacing, I think, and then individually esports has different pacing. But yeah, there's definitely different pacing so that you have plenty of time to do that. You're not doing the because that is sports casting to me. I
Mhm.
think of the like da 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 da
Mhm.
da 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 like where it's very much a more casual conversation. So I think we're allowed to do that more. Allowed to theory craft more and then almost give them the benefit of the doubt. And not just because it's a complex game and in some ways you're kind of trying to prove the point that it's just so difficult to even be at any level. I think we also have to keep in mind that these are people we're going to be meeting and talking to,
Right.
and who I would usually advise not to listen to commentators, and I'm sure many of them don't bother, but sometimes they do, right?
Right. And you make a good point there with how it's paced. I would go as far as to say traditional sports, the broadcasting is percussive and esports is melodic. So percussive being like in hockey, it would be like Stamkos left circle, passes to Hedman at the point. Hedman back to Stamkos. Stamkos down low to point, but down low. And it's da 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 da. And maybe that's the drummer in me coming out right now. But then in esports, it's almost like making his way across the map. He's going to poke into the third base here. Let's see if there's a natural, and he sees there's a natural. He's going to go and make his way into the third with the Hellions. Like it is a crescendo that is more melodic, and I think that's one of the beautiful parts about esports is it allows you to be melodic because it could be 30 minutes of like basically a symphony by the time you're done. In football, it can get chopped up, whether there's a whistle. Hockey, the puck can go out of play. There can be a goal. There can be a penalty, and it naturally causes a hiccup in the action. Whereas in esports, you can just write a little overture and have a great time doing it.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. I am not at all musically inclined,
Oh,
but even I understood it, of course,
oh,
but
cool. All right, good. All
I think
right,
most
right
people
on.
understand it. But I would never have thought of it myself. But that is a very good way of putting it,
No, thank you.
and a beautiful way of putting it too. I'm going to say this next time someone's like ragging on esports.
It's all
So
yours. It's all yours.
thanks.
Yeah.
So when you then watch, like, do you think that there could be more crossover though? Like there could be things learned between the genres here, or is it actually just too different? Like is traditional sports broadcasting ever going to change? Or is esports going to change more to it? Do you think there's a world where esports is more of that, percussive, is what you were saying, or the opposite for traditional sports, or is it just far too different to even really have crossover? Like, is a good traditional sports broadcaster going to make a good esports one, and vice versa?
Right. Well, I think it's almost the combination of when you can maybe be both. The Lightning have an announcer who's retired this year. He'll be inducted into the Broadcast Hall of Fame. His name is Rick Peckham. And Rick Peckham has not only a tremendous voice, but he does seem to combine both, I suppose, where it is melodic and it is percussive at the same time and accurate and poignant. I think where it's learning how to make one be the other, but I think that distinction is there because the content shapes it. It's sort of like context shapes content, so to speak. So in understanding that like this is the way the game is structured, it's almost like certain esports would take after traditional sports and certain sports, traditional sports might start taking after esports, especially with finding casters with good chemistry, which is not easy. It is everyone's different in that regard. And finding chemistry is extremely difficult. And I guess is a good segue. Do you have and please don't name names or anything like that unless it's like you're ready to like you've been waiting for this moment. Um do you find it hard to perform with certain people because not only might it be an on-camera thing, but also just I'm trying to use my words as carefully as possible here
You
as to
said
not get
behind the scenes beef.
behind the scenes beef, or I think I'll back this up one step here to explain my point. I am focused on my craft more so than anything else. I'm not focused on getting attention. I'm not focused on like, all right, I did this. Did my demo reel get more hits on YouTube? Did I have more emails? Do I have more followers on Instagram or whatever? My the biggest critique I always have for myself is how do I feel when it was over? And usually I'm pretty hard on myself. I think anyone in this industry is self-reflective, like we talked about earlier, cutting with a scalpel and not an axe. My concern is having worked with people that are all about them. And it's not about the craft anymore. It is about them. Is there anyone you've had to work with along those lines where you're like, here we go again?
No, personally, not really. It's not like all sunshine and daisies with everyone I've
Of
ever
course.
cast with, but I haven't really had that problem because StarCraft doesn't really have that problem. I think maybe in
Right.
the beginning it did. And then there's been other esports that definitely did slash do clamoring to be the Here's the Storm broadcaster of the year when, it first was released was pretty cutthroat apparently. And then you hear lots of things from like CS:GO scene. It can be pretty bad, but for StarCraft, there's not really any of that because I mean, in a way, this could sound bad, but I think it's nothing but good. Like in a way, there's like this thing where you're either included or you're not. You're either in with the group or you're not, and that's where people are gonna be like, "Oh, boys club." But no, like it's whether or not you're chill, basically. Like, are
Right.
you cool? Are you good? Are you actually thinking about the entire production? Are you just here to make money? Which who would in StarCraft, right? But yeah, so as soon as that happens, like you're just it's a very simple thing, but there's kind of a moment where everyone I think can kind of feel it though. Like I don't can't speak to like, back when it was like the OG crew back in 2013, but basically when I went to Montreal for my first event and In Control cracked a joke and I responded and he went, "Oh shit, I'm an asshole." I felt that like that just like, okay, I'm in here. Like
Right.
they're not side eyeing me. They're not like, does she really deserve this? Like, no. And then I learned later that there were plenty of people backing me up and saying that I should get that chance. That happens in StarCraft. So I've never really had any bad experiences as far as being like you're only here because you want the money or because you think you're going to be the standout star. You're not working with me or working against me. It's happened sometimes, but I really don't anytime it's happened, I don't think it's because of that bad mentality. I think there's times you have a bad cast or you don't realize you have a bad habit, but I've never like said anyone was I would never say that anyone was malicious like
Right.
with this intention, right?
And that's what's
Yeah.
interesting too with your community and StarCraft 2 is for me, hockey is going to exist if I were to leave tomorrow. The NHL's going on. Like it's going to keep going. And I think there's a very beautiful investment that you all have in supporting that StarCraft 2 community. Is like the better you are, the more StarCraft 2 exposure will get. And more so and more so and more so. And you guys have a legit not only do you have a train, but you've got a vested interest in making sure everyone with you succeeds. That's what's so cool about it is like you as a StarCraft 2 caster will do better in some way if Pig does better. And if Winter does better, it might drive people to your channel, so on and so forth, because it's getting more people into the game and then getting more people into casting and like, I like talking about StarCraft 2. Maybe I could do this one day. I think that's really a beautiful thing about that community, and it's something that draws me to it all the time. Like, there's a reason why I watch StarCraft 2 esports in addition to traditional sports. I'm the only person I know of in the Amalie Arena that does that, but it's because of that. Eh,
I guess the saying is like, "Rising tide lifts all ships."
That is correct. And loose lips sink ships. It's both of those at the same time, right?
Oh, I hadn't heard the latter,
Oh, you never
but
have?
yeah,
Oh,
I only recently learned the first part, honestly, if I'm being
okay.
honest.
Right.
But yeah, I that is absolutely true. On like in the similar vein, though, there are times where it really does suck when someone is not doing as well as you would hope, and yet the community doesn't seem to notice. And it's like you're not going to go out there and be like, "Well, actually, this guy sucked." Like,
Right.
what are you guys talking about? Focus on me, you know? Because
Mhm.
the other nice thing is that in general, I think we're just all not assholes.
It doesn't
That's
seem like
the
it at all.
that's
It
the good
seems
thing.
like everyone is having such a good time, especially like when I'll watch the back seat. It's just the jokes that are happening and everyone's just kind of commentating on what the next move might be. There's no one's fighting for airtime. It's like take a stab. Like maybe this is funny. Maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't. Um do you have you had a moment on there or on the air though when you've said something and you're like this is not funny and there's no putting this back in the cage. It's not
Yeah,
happening.
yeah. Yeah. I have done it a couple of times, and fortunately it hasn't been like live stream fails material, but I've gotten even like, kind of chastised a little bit, by people, and like a lit like it's not like they came in, they were like, "What the hell, ZombieGrub?" They were just like,
Right.
"Hey, that didn't really work."
Mhm.
So, but I figure that there's so many things I've been trying to work on to be a better commentator. Analyst, always you're always studying, but then play by play. And then I also have been trying to basically be funnier, which is a very just you cannot learn it so much.
Mm.
I think there are things you can do to be learning faster. And one of those things is basically failing a fuck ton. So
Yeah.
you just have to like send your face in first and then hope you don't get thwacked. So that's what I've
Yeah.
been doing. And then so I've been kind of forgiving myself for any times where I just said something on air and it was just like crickets. And I'm like, ha 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 ha.
Mm.
Ha.
Well, is there anything as far as I've experienced, I don't know if I've ever experienced feedback. Like we were talking earlier in the podcast about getting feedback from a person or a trusted individual within the industry. I've never gotten more feedback than making a joke in front of 20,000 people that is crickets and then asking someone like, "Hey, was this not funny?" And they were like, "Not only was it not funny, I don't get it. What is there to get?" And then I'll explain it and they'll be like, "Oh, it's still not funny. It's still not funny." And it's 20,000 people all in agreement that there was one a not funny person 20 seconds ago. It was me. I was not funny 20 seconds ago. And um it's that's only happened once luckily in a long time, but the lesson learned from that really is it wasn't funny. It wasn't off color, but it was authentic. It was something I wrote down that I have like very regimented preparations I like to go through, right? And one of them is making sure I'm writing. I always try to make sure I'm writing something. Either it's in my phone or like if I, back in the before times when you could go to a coffee shop and write things down on a notebook, I would do that. Just get into the habit of like having a new idea and a new thought. And I got to tell you, the patting on my back that I did at my local coffee shop when I wrote that like little line was like, this is going to get you to the top, man. This is the one. This is the one they're going to know you by. And then 8 hours later, I was like, how beautiful is this moment of humbling to realize like, no, you might think this is funny, but it's because you get something and it tickles something in your subconscious from maybe when you were a teenager or a kid. But that feedback is something. So I understand what you mean when like the stream is like, huh? Question mark, question mark, question mark. That's as good as feedback as you can get.
Luckily, it's not usually just like because I haven't done any really like solo roles. So usually, if something fails, the rest of the guys are all clever enough or friendly enough to kind of like lightly rib or whatever. So I haven't gotten that yet. Cross my fingers.
Right.
But just in terms of like obviously the more obvious you are at you're trying to be funny, the worse it's going to be, right?
Oh God.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can prep a little bit, that's what stand up is. Like you're trying to be funny, sure, but like there's a difference, right? So usually it's always the best moments happen kind of naturally and you go back to that and you're like, "Oh, why was that a good moment?" And then you build off of that. Because there's one time I tried to joke at kind of Vite and it probably I don't see the Twitch reaction, but it probably wasn't very funny. And then then I didn't try making a joke on another aspect. I was on like the panel or whatever, and I just made a joke about going to art school, and for some reason that was hilarious. Like the desk laughed, and apparently
Mm.
Twitch chat lolled, and I was like, I thought it was the lowest hanging fruit. Like I thought that wasn't going to get any
Well,
any laughs, but
isn't it weird how it's jarring sometimes when you'll say something and it'll get a laugh and you're like, that wasn't the joke. The joke is still coming. I guess I'm going to stop here and cut my
yeah,
losses.
stop here.
I'll take this. Thank you. It's funny, and I think anyone who's trying to excel in this industry is going to overthink it to a degree. The idea is identify right at the point where you're overthinking it. And you brought up like there's maybe nothing worse than trying to be funny. Either it's funny or it's not. And it has to be organic, and it has to be the feeling of spontaneous humor is it's palpable. It's electric. It's in the air. I think we've all been on a date more than once in our life where we're like, I hope I can impress the other person by being funny right now. And then you're not because you're not in the moment. You're out of the moment trying to be something you're not. If there was a funny moment to be had, you would have had it. But chemistry and all the kinds of other factors play into it. It's really learning how to take your punches when you can. And when you see that opening, bam, go. And it'll come to you. It always does. In those moments of, I think, true authenticity and relaxation where you're comfortable. And I think there's a lot to be said for finding ways to make sure when you go on, you're comfortable. Like, do you have like a day of regimen where it's like, this is what I do every day I cast? Or even sometimes like the night before, does it start at any point or is it non existent?
No, I don't really do anything specific. So
Must be nice to be naturally talented. Must be a delight.
sure. For online broadcast, there's basically no prep, and I sometimes like I forget that this might have been something I don't think I ever did though. Honestly, like of course I've had like the nervous thing once or twice, but even I was surprisingly not nervous for a lot of things I thought I was going to be nervous about.
Like
But
what?
let's see here. Like I wasn't nervous when I did my first BlizzCon cast. And then I was nervous on my like the fifth day of BlizzCon, not because I was going up in stage, but because there was this weird thing that happened about breakfast, and it's just like the air was heavy, and it was just like this feels weird. Now I got a stomach ache. Now I'm nervous.
Oh, wow.
So that
Yeah.
type of thing can happen, of course. But
Yeah, of course.
yeah, I do a lot of prep work as far as like analyzing and studying and making sure that I'm the most confident that I can be, which comes down to even silly things like I bought myself like a briefcase to carry around my notes, and I was
Why is
like,
that silly? That's professional as it gets.
I know, right? I look
Yeah.
so professional, but it
Yeah.
just like for me, it's like confidence is number one,
Hmm.
and not fake confidence or overconfidence. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't do much prep, but I oftentimes get reminded watching or casting with newer guys. I can feel it. I'm on air, and I'm just like, especially for an online broadcast, which I don't really like. I'm not nervous at all about. And this, one of my co-casters will be kind of new. 5,000 viewers is a lot, type of thing, and they're like,
Right.
"Oh man, I'm feeling kind of nervous. I hope I do okay." And I'm just like, "What? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." And then I get up and like go do something.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
I
No,
realized afterwards that they were probably trying to get me to calm them down, but I didn't
mhm,
realize it at the time. So I was
sure.
just like, "Yeah, no, it's fine."
Well, it's you say confidence, and there is a fine line. I'm not saying you're on the wrong side of this line. Confidence versus arrogance, and the not being prepared to be like, I got this, is I've seen it implode on stage. Um, and I don't want to say I took pleasure in it, but it's like, hey, man, this is what it is. You've got to when I've had to help mentor people, like, do not roll in here like you know everything. So my like prep, so to speak, it's I'm finding a way to get some sort of exercise. Um, it used to be skateboarding. I still skateboard all the time when I can, but I've I've had to get like I've had to go to the ER before a game because I was reckless and I was like, if I get up at 9, I'll skate from 9:30 to 11. I'll be home. I've got 5 hours and then I can go to the arena. And I fell doing something at the park and tore my elbow open. And I was like, does this need stitches? Does this need stitches? And I was with a buddy of mine. He was like, you need to go to the hospital. You need to go to the hospital right now. And So since then, I've deviated from that, where it's like I'm going to the gym, I'm going for a run, I'll play drums as hard as I can or something to get the blood flowing. I'll go for like a 2 mile walk just to like get loose. Um, some sort of green vegetable gets ingested. Like usually it's a spinach and kale salad with like either like some canned tuna or like some chicken, just something like that, and like got a vitamin B I take. I got like a couple other random things where I'm just like, okay, these are this is as long as I do this and I drink a ton of water, a regretful amount of water by the end of the day, and making sure that like, okay, I've done all the prep. Now let's go have fun. I've done all of the cleanup, so to speak, and I'm very lucky. I work with my audio engineer at the arena is a guy named Hunter, and Hunter is for how animated and verbose I am. Hunter is just, hey man, and he's just a delight to be around, and having that support system gets you on that stage feeling confident. And I think that prep is important to me for that confidence going up there, because I think feeling confident is one thing, and the step above that that I've really started to experience in the last year because of being fortunate enough to teach. I love teaching. I love it so much, more than I thought I would. Um, and the kids are great. I love hanging out in my classroom. They're funny. They keep me on my toes. Um, but I have like the teaching job, and then I've got the lightning job, and it's a beautiful thing because I can do both. And as a result of doing both and having some stability in that, like, all right, well, if one goes away, at least I've got the other, and vice versa. It's fun feeling dangerous when you go somewhere. Like, I'm confident because I love this other thing too. And the confidence from this thing, I'm going to bring over here. And it's a nice ping pong. And the beautiful thing about teaching is like, I'm practicing public speaking all day. And then I go do it. It's like a 7 hour warm up. And then, all right, go do the job. So it's there is a balance that needs to get struck with that, because, of course, I'm sure you've experienced it with, I mean, what's the longest cast you've ever done? 12 hours?
Well, technically it was the best of 69, which I think was 16 hours.
Oh my God.
So,
What type
or
of break do you
14,
get in
something
there?
like that.
Is there any break at all?
Yeah, what we did was that I ate while a player came on and cast with Graham. So
Okay.
I think, and then I did it like, but like I remember because I was still watching, I was still listening. So at one point, like for some reason, it was like Moss or someone, they were making jokes. I actually unmuted my mic just to like
Oh.
expand on the joke.
Okay. All right.
Which actually ended up being a funny moment. But that was yeah, that was delirious. Then most recently there was like a 10-hour DreamHack broadcast, which
Hmm.
was a lot more stressful. And one of the things that we've been dealing with is the amount of stress that being that public person is, right? And then realizing that sometimes when it doesn't feel like something's gone right, or it didn't feel like there was a lot of chemistry or what have you, is actually like it's very correct to actually blame the 10-hour broadcast partially, because we just like we don't do that while also being on top of our game. We might do it for an online broadcast where we can go get a snack for the first 3 minutes because he said like nothing much happens, but
Right.
it is so different. Shoot, there's nothing that you brought up that I wanted to expand on, but
Yeah, please, please.
I've forgotten it right now about
Was it about
confidence. Oh,
feeling dangerous?
oh yeah. So yeah, the dangerous thing was kind of funny, but
Hmm.
on the expanded confidence thing, I think the other difference is that what I see from a lot of other esports, and this is kind of a benefit and it's a double edged sword, I guess, for StarCraft, is that I actually brought this up at one point when I started to feel more confident, kind of like chipping in as the newbie commentator. I kind of started bringing up some, like, yeah, I mean, wouldn't like more stats be kind of cool? And actually, I had this conversation with Roddy, and he was like, "I don't think it matters." But Roddy's also a very like naturally talented, very go with the flow type of good. So, anyways, a lot of other esports, a lot of traditional broadcasting is going to be backed with a lot of stats. Either that's what you're going to be talking about on the screen, or you're going to have that in your earpiece, or you're going to have like sheets of notes, like graphic paper for notes. StarCraft, it's not that you can't do that. It's that we don't think that it really adds a lot to the broadcast. So even if, sometimes even a point where it actually is this build going into this timing, you don't want to necessarily like emphasize it because it just kind of drags the broadcast down. So for StarCraft and a lot of esports, I do think there is this idea of just all of the prep happens long before the broadcast, like which also makes it very difficult to get into because you can't get the sheets forward and then just be like, okay, I'll put these two words together and sound smart. Like there's so many things that we are expected to know and be able to adapt to on the fly because we're supposed to have years and years of experience doing it before we even got our first big shot, which is a lot of pressure, but it's honestly what ends up happening. So all my prep is done, the month leading up to it. And then I basically don't do much of anything at the time. I actually even made a point to focus on hanging out with people. So honestly, for a lot of the StarCraft people, we have our little rituals, of course, and where there's a little bit of prep and study, and we even got together for like a morning discussion. But what happened is that I was like, "Hey Maynard, hey Pig, do you want to like do like study and crossover notes and whatever?" And they're like, "Yeah, fine, sure." We were kind of doing that, and then we started talking about like storylines and players, and kind of got away from like the technical like nitty gritty. And then Roddy came down, grabbed the beer, and was like, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, "Oh, we're studying." And he's like, "Oh, okay, it's interesting." Didn't really say much, and then he's like, "So what about this one player who does this one thing?" It just happens naturally, honestly. Like our prep a lot of the time is being able to converse with each other because we're always around each other. Where other esports, I think they're getting a lot of details added in at the time of their arrival to a stadium, or they have shifts where it means that there's two people, three people, and then everyone else has actually gone back to the hotel or something, and it's just them and like they're doing whatever. Like, no, we're always together basically, which makes it sound very clingy, but it
Right,
works for us.
but to have people to work with that you aren't just itching to get away from, that's a gift. That is a legitimate gift that you are not like, I just am looking for any excuse to go back to my hotel room right now and get away
Yeah.
from everyone. That is incredible because it makes the cast better, I'm sure, for certain. But in the beginning of that, where did you fall in as far as the esports? Like, when was your entry? Was it Wings of Liberty, like right from then, or were you doing stuff with Brood War even?
No, no. So I played Brood War. I played N64.
Oh, get out
StarCraft.
of town! Are you serious?
I did, yes. And
Oh
then
my god.
I'm kind of like maybe 10 years after Brood War was released,
Uh-huh.
I played the campaign, and then I got StarCraft 2 when it was released, and then about 6 months into StarCraft 2, I was like, I want to get better at this. Wanted to beat my brother, which was always a goal, and now I can totally trash him anytime. And looked up guild builds on YouTube and was like, what are esports? What is this? Hold on here. So at the time, it felt like I was already very late to the party, but now it seems like I've been here forever, which is mostly true.
Right. Well, I get to the late to the party thing because we grew up playing StarCraft in the house, but I had no idea of the community that existed until I was in my mid 20s, and I I just had gotten a computer that could play Wings of Liberty with like my first job. I got a computer and I was like, it works. Yeah, I can play StarCraft too. All right. And I was like, all right, I've heard of the ladder. I remember seeing it when I was little on Brood War and being afraid of it and being like, nah, I don't want to do that. I don't know. I don't, I'm too afraid. And then I started playing, and that led me to day nine. When it was day nine, was just the day nine daily. That was all it was, and then Fridays off. And it was just this. What a just a like a gift this community can really be to a lot of people. Um, and ever since then, it's been like I'll go on like a streak where like I'm playing StarCraft all the time, and then the hockey season will come around, and it's like there needs to be priorities where it's like, all right, play StarCraft every 3 or 4 days, and then you've got to be locked into the other part because I want to make sure I'm fresh because StarCraft is not a game. I'm sure for all the listeners that are aware of this, you don't like put on StarCraft and your favorite podcast and just chill out on the ladder. Like you are hyper focused the entire time. And it's just crisis management for 20 or 30 minutes. Um, and so, yeah, that's when I really kind of got into it. And, I'm enjoying the casual side of it. I mean, especially because I'm a diamond player, so it can only be casual. And, um, but it's a fantastic community you found yourself in, Zombie Grub, for real.
Oh yeah, I definitely think the same a lot of the time. And while it's like I still would love to be a broadcaster,
Mm.
even if it is a different game. I still find a lot of joy in just the casting. Obviously, my preference is always going to be StarCraft and the people in StarCraft as well. So I do consider myself very lucky to be in this position. And I do think that, like, I mean, a lot of people are going to be like, this is just like been a StarCraft, just nothing but compliments there. And well, I don't know. There's actually, I can think of very few things wrong that, especially that can't be fixed within the commentary of StarCraft. So
Well, with
it's
that,
all genuine.
how do you feel about the announcement from the other day?
So if this is gonna be like a month later, so this is soon after the no more paid content
Right.
announcement from Blizzard. So I don't actually really care as someone who's been in this job and who's just been I've always had like this I've been prepared for an unstable lifestyle, shall we say, because I was gonna be an artist before I became a commentator.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I've always there's always been a little bit of that doubt. Even 4 years ago, there's rumors that there was no war chest, something was gonna happen, blah, blah, blah. It's always there. And the fact is that just 10 months ago, 9 months ago, we had a 3-year deal announced. And everyone is like, yeah, because StarCraft's the greatest and StarCraft has many things to offer. And then here we are 8 months later in this announcement, which just says what we already knew, that Blizzard has changed and Blizzard doesn't really care about us anymore. And these, 1 to 3 things they would have released, because it really wasn't that freaking. It's not like we're losing 5 war chests and 10 co-op commanders. Isn't going to happen anymore. I mean, I thought they would announce that for 2023, to be honest, but the fact they announce it now does not change my opinion. We still have 2 more years until I am kind of VT 23 to basically be as happy as we are now. And it gets more and more frustrating to see people be like, no, this is actually a reason to consider stop playing StarCraft, or this is now going to make me stop playing StarCraft. Like, I think they're being a bit babyish. I understand grieving and there's a process of grief, but
Sure.
like some people are being weird about it, shall I say. And yeah, I've always known that 2023 was going to be a big question mark. And if both EPT and Blizzard were like, we're done with StarCraft at that time, I'd be like, that's understandable. But for now, the fact that it's announced like what 2 3 days ago, like I didn't care that much, honestly. Got me good content though, got me views. So
Right. Well, and what happens beyond this, I think, is interesting because there's the short-sighted gut reaction, which is like, what do you mean no more content? But who's to say what's going to happen with any esport? I think the last 8 months have pretty much shown anyone that the future is uncertain. There's any number of random occurrences that could happen at any point in time that can take you and your life in a different direction. And I think about like a lot of the youngsters that I'm around, they're kids that are playing MOBAs. And I think there's going to be a natural progression at one point to be like, I want more of a challenge. You might only be able to play MOBAs for so long. I'm not saying that MOBAs are easy by any stretch, but if you're like, what if I could do this except instead of controlling one unit, controlling an army? There's not to say like this is a permanent decision and then we're done forever. Who's to say they might not reassess it in the future as StarCraft if it grows?
yeah.
There's options.
It's yeah, it's possible. And there's also a very realistic chance there's gonna be an actual StarCraft 2 competitor with everyone who's moved away from Blizzard, because
Hmm.
what we missed so far is that people don't have StarCraft, and there's no other StarCraft like game. Like Age of Empires is so fucking different,
Right.
or any other artist I can think of, honestly, is so different, and that could change. But I think the Artosis did a bit of like a podcast with Devin Nash, I think his name is. It was very interesting, but at one point they were kind of talking about how RTS unfortunately isn't the big genre. It's not going to turn over a lot of new RTSs that are really big. And then I don't remember why, but at some point Artosis was like, well, if people have to go back to actually wanting to try, right? Or something along those lines. Because they were
Oh
talking
my.
about like all the free to play shit and like,
Yeah.
appealing to the common denominator. And he's like, at some point it's got to go around again
Mhm.
to people wanting a challenge and wanting to feel like they did something that was really impressive and be rewarded for it. So I did agree with them, but I love how candid Artosis is about just
Right.
like so many people are stupid. They don't realize what they want. you know.
And it's helpful having that mouthpiece that'll be like, I'll say it, and he does, and it's a joy to watch him do that within the community. Is there any type for you with watching these guys from the last few years? Is there any sense of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I know. I guess I got to say yes, but I mean honestly, not not so much. I feel like I did my due. I put in my dues. Like I did a lot before I was brought up, and then when I was brought up, I thought I was told a lot of different things and took that and worked on it. And I'm not gonna say I'm like this perfect creature because I've learned so much, but I think I'm where I belong, and I know I can push farther. So no, I'm actually even still kind of unfamiliar with the concept when people
Okay,
bring it up. I'm very sympathetic when people bring it up, but I'm
sure.
just like, I don't think that explains any of my issues, I
Right.
guess.
Well, no, it's interesting though because I think maybe the imposter syndrome is natural for maybe the first few times, but after a very short amount of time, you're like you realize people are people, and everyone's the same. Not the same, but everyone has their pluses, their minuses, and for me with pro sports, like my childhood hero is someone I work with regularly now as we commentate on events together. Brian Bradley, who was the Lightning's first All Star, like as far as I was concerned, he lived in my Super Nintendo NHL '96 cartridge. And then when I was in college, he would be calling me to be like, "Hey, how's the meal plan at Florida? Is the meal plan there any good? Because I think we might have one of the kids might be going there. We'll see if they want to get on the meal plan." And there's a moment of like, Brian is calling you to see how the meal plan is at Florida. If I told you you were never going to play in the NHL, but Brian's going to call you about food at your college, and hey, he has your phone number, he's calling you, you'd be like, you know what? All right, this is pretty cool. And the more I've gotten to know Brian over the years, I've been working with Brian for 10 years at this point. Like Brian's just a nice guy. I you the interesting thing is like you start meeting people with superpowers that they don't come down in any way. You find yourself rising to meet them. And that's something that's I hope people that are listening with this, if there's any fear about what to do moving forward, if you're like, should I pursue this? Like, I don't know if I can do it. Like, I was looking down the abyss when I was 20 years old. Like, I had no idea how I was going to get out of the hole I had dug for myself. I was depressed and anxious all the time. I was barely sleeping. And then applying to the Lightning, this million to one shot has led me here to a podcast that I could have never dreamed about. Being on your podcast, like it wouldn't have even like registered or doing things in front of the arena like, hey, you're going to go into this arena and you're going to put a toga on and give away Little Caesars pizza. Man, make it funny. And not only that, you're going to get paid to do it. Like, it would have been like you telling me, like, "Hey, meet me in Hyrule Field for dinner." I'm like, "Well, that's only in Zelda. How do I get to Hyrule? That's not a real place I can get to." Um, so that's big for I think I just for again for any of the listeners, in case anyone's listening and needs to hear that. If you have any doubt or you're like, "I can't do it," like, says who? Says who? Go for it.
Usually yourself, to be honest.
Yes, that is it's I think anyone in some ways who's worth their weight in our industry needs a push. Needs someone to be like, "You can do this. You can do this."
If they from the get go were like, no, I can do it, I'd be like a little. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
from
Who's
the
your cheering
actual
section?
get go.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think everyone
yeah,
needs a cheering section and a
yeah,
push and a confirmation. So, and certainly I've had plenty of people do that or they continue trying doing that, I suppose. But I really like what you said about you meet these superhumans because I really do think that like StarCraft has a couple of just like superhuman, or I've always put it as larger than life for me. Like I just even if I've known Tasteless for a while, and like I know he likes me and he's like he's helped me out and whatever, and I'm just like every time I hang out with him at like 4 in the morning outside of 7-Eleven in Korea, just shooting a shit, I'm like, oh my god, like this is actually happening. Like I definitely have that, but
yeah,
it's not that I don't feel like I'm like faking it or anything like that. I just know that like I've gotten to a point where I am cool enough. I am chill enough. I'm
right.
I'm a fun enough person to be around that he would do that. So
Yeah, and
but
you have
it's
to
about
build that.
matching it.
You have to build that into yourself too. It's great when it's innate and it feels good, but I think we've all been in those situations where someone is trying to make it work and trying to be like, "Does anyone like me yet? Huh? Huh?" And I know that feeling you're talking about, like how you're talking about with Tasteless. Like there have been moments where Brian and I we were eating biscuits and gravy at a hotel before a hockey camp, and it's like, is this real? Is this a real thing? Like we're both eating biscuits and gravy, and he's reading the newspaper. Like you found a paper newspaper and you're reading it, and we're eating biscuits and gravy, and it's like we're sitting at the table like both doing our own thing. There's not like, oh, we have to talk to like make this thing work at breakfast. It's just we're both relaxed and chilled out, and there's something beautiful about that, and it's something that can't be taken for granted ever. I think the second it gets taken for granted is the second it can get taken away, because complacency is the destructor of talent in this industry. I don't know how else to explain it other than the second I've watched people around me be like, "No, no, I know I'm good. I know. No, I'm really good. I'm really good. I know." It's like, "Oh, I'm watching the Roman Empire go off a cliff." Um, or or for StarCraft, it's like I'm watching the Marines walk into the tank line. Like I'm just watching. Like, anyone gonna tell him? Is he gonna throw a scan down, or he's just gonna walk in? All right, let him do it. Let him do it. Can't help them all.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of that in esports for sure. Of course, there's people who do that, they get complacent. There's also people who just literally throw themselves off a cliff by like showing that they're, racist or sexist or whatever. But it's just like, yeah, complacency is definitely the silent killer, the thing that's like people are kind of like, hey, maybe, and they're just like, I'm not gonna listen. But I guess my last question here, because I need to wrap things up. It's getting
Okay.
kind of long. It's
Oh, cool.
yeah, it's that if what would you say that esports broadcasters could really look at and learn from traditional sports? What's missing from the esports broadcast that you would really like to see implemented?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, the only thing is, it's more of a suggestion in question form. Is I wonder how much the action can speak for itself in esports. Um, there are moments where, especially in StarCraft, when you have certain engagements where it's like, if it's Protoss engaging in, and it's like Zealots in the front, you got your Stalkers behind it, and then there's like Colossi and Templar, and there's just so much to break down. It's finding what's most important almost. Like, is it most important? Like, it's probably talking about Psystorm and like the AoE and like the area it takes away, and like, let's see where it happens. Um, I think when I watch sports commentators that are really good, is it's like we talked about that percussive nature of like, um, especially in hockey, there's what's called a power play. If the other team takes a penalty, they lose one player off the ice for 2 minutes, and the team that had the penalty against, or did not have the penalty against them, has 5 players against the other team's 4. And there's so much nuance that's happening as the defensive team usually sets up in like a box, and the offensive team will find a way to make several passes in a row to see how the defense will behave and then make a move. But they won't necessarily commentate on, he's passing down low to see if he can get anyone to move. Now it's backing up top. Let's see how the defense moves again. It's the puck is down low. The puck is up high. The puck is to the right. The puck is back at the point. And expressing, like, letting the tension naturally build, especially if you know, like, here it comes. Like, they're going to take 2 more passes, and then they're going to let a shot rip. Um, it's sort of like, I guess the only advice, and I hold you guys in a very high regard as far as what you're able to do in a very short amount of time to break down what's happening, is maybe there's a space for breath. Like, let it happen. But I would hate to have any type of weight as far as what I'm saying right now, because it's, you guys are legitimate. And just because you're not on ESPN does not take away from that in any way. You are commentating professional sports, and who's to say that traditional sports, quite honestly, couldn't learn from you guys as well, with finding that melody and finding that way of like, we got to talk through everything, and let's not wait until instant replay. What if we can do it right now? Like, do it right now. Explain, like, here it comes. And there are sometimes they have it with football where they'll have really experienced players in the booth explaining like they're going to pass it to the left, and then sure enough, like play happens, throw goes to the left, and it's like, how did you know that was going to happen? And it's like, well, they've been working on hand signals all week, and if he tilts his head this way and then does the hand signal, it's going to the left. If he tilts his head and then uses his right hand, it's going to the right. All those little things of nuance where I think that could be a spot where esports is going to be able to benefit traditional sports. And I want to see that crossover. I mean, if there's a way I can be a conduit, like hopefully I can. Hopefully this is of some sort of value. I learn more from watching you guys though every day. I like getting the exposure of like, how is this person doing it? What kind of content are they providing? How are they filling? Like, there's a fascination with me for filling dead space. I've been since I was, I think, in like the second grade. Like I have a very distinct memory of like career day and someone being up in front of there and being like, he's going to talk for the next hour, and being like, how? For an hour. For an hour he's going to talk about being an eye doctor. Like, okay, let's see what he's got. Like I'm in the second grade. I got nowhere to be. Let's see what he's got. And I was fascinated. And that's continued through adulthood even, to be like, how on earth are they going to fill time? And for you guys with, 15-hour Katowice broadcasts, it's like it's a art form beyond art forms.
I do think that it's a lot about. I agree that I think you should always be looking at everyone who speaks for a living, basically, and seeing what they do. So that's different esports, that's traditional sports, that's public speakers, that's TED Talks, that's voice acting. Like it's actually everything that has to do with your voice, basically, or being on a camera. Like both things are going to really help. So I think there is something to learn from traditional sports broadcasters. Like I never watched sports. I always played them, but I didn't really bother watching them. I guess my family were Steelers fans, and that's kind of it.
Okay.
But I recently watched The Last Dance. If you saw that, the
Oh my God, the
documentary.
Bulls documentary.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah, absolutely
Fantastic.
fantastic. The
Yeah.
storylines that were built in the NBA, the drama, like it was all fantastic. Well done documentary. But there's also like one thing that, of course, wasn't highlighted because it wasn't part of the broadcast, but the actual commentary, right? Like so many times, the big Michael Jordan shots were, when Michael Jordan shoots and then it just hangs and then it goes in, and then you have the explosiveness of the crowd, and then actually after the crowd explodes, the caster explodes. It's not them going like he shoots, it looks like it's going to be good, okay, it hits, okay, it's in. Like it's not, you don't
Yeah.
detail that. You
Right.
you literally let it hang.
Yeah.
And I always was like, man, it's like something that I wish worked so much better in StarCraft. And I don't think it's impossible to add in, but I know it's so much more difficult. And that's also why like I actually really like Rocket League as an esport, because
Sure.
I think it can do some of that stuff that traditional sports seems to get away with, and esports doesn't. But yeah, I agree with you. I think there's something to learn from everywhere. And of course, I do agree that I think one of the worst things about learning play by play is that it is so tempting to get bogged down in the details, especially coming from an analyst point of view, where like I got to get people need to know I'm smart.
Right.
When
Right.
honestly, some of the best play by play that we have, the most like iconic, is what like Doa like yelling at Faker. He's like, Faker, what was that? Like he didn't explain it. He just asked.
Yeah.
Or Tastosis, like Kat said that one of his favorite things about Tasteless is when Tasteless says, I have no idea what's happening.
It's honest. And that goes back to one of our original points for all of this is like, if honesty is perceived, it makes the content and the cast more endearing by an immeasurable amount.
But I had a lot of fun talking with you, man. I think we
Yeah, right
shared a
back
lot of
at
the
you.
same ideas. And I learned a little bit more about the fascinating world of traditional sports. With hockey being one of the last things I ever would know anything about. It was
Right.
interesting hearing you talk about it in contrast. So thank you very much. I'll be using the musical side of things
Oh,
for
cool.
a while yet.
I hope so. I hope so. And again, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this because it's um, doing everything I do in pro sports or traditional sports. It did still feel like this is like a whole new mountain to climb. Just even reaching out, and um, I was afraid of sounding arrogant in any way to be like, well, I'm in traditional sports, and I wrote that email to you like 4 times, and I was like, all right, just words are words. And it's such a pleasure to be on this. I'm truly honored to have been a part of the Zombie Grub Casters Call podcast. Like, this is not, I told you, like, top 5 moment for me. That's not a joke. That's sincere.
Oh, thank you.
Of course, of course.
I really appreciate that. I
Yeah.
do love it though that we all do that thing where we're like typing this like email. I think it's gonna be really important. And like you're to your professor and you're like 5 paragraphs long, perfect grammar, and the response is like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Right.
Meet me later.
Right. But the thing is, it's known and it's perceived on the other end of like, oh, they care. All right, this isn't like a catfishing or like
True. Yes, yes.
opportunity. Yeah, it's like this is real. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, right
again,
on.
thanks for reaching out. I'm
Of
glad
course, of course. Thank you
it's
for
been a
having
top
me.
5 experience for you. It's pretty
Absolutely.
cool.
Right on.
So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoy learning a little bit from the other side of things for broadcasting wise, and I hope you will check out the Patreon, and then I also hope to see you for the next episode. Bye.